And so all of these things can be distracting during prayer. So how do we overcome these? Well, I'm glad you asked. Part 1, quieting your environment. Jesus talks about this in Matthew during the Sermon on the Mount. He says, but when you pray, go into your room, close the door, pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret, he will reward you. Now, does this mean we have to pray in secret? No. We can pray around other people. Jesus prayed around other people. That is perfectly fine. Here, Jesus was talking about motivation. He was talking about motivation. Are you praying so that people see you? Are you praying so that people think, wow, look at that person. They're praying. They're so spiritual. That person's awesome. Or are you praying to sincerely talk to God? That's what Jesus is talking about. But there's still more we can pull from this. It is a lot easier to get alone with God when you're actually alone, right? When you're not surrounded by a busy classroom or by a bunch of siblings or by the TV rambling on about some show or with music in your ears. Jesus sets an example for us, and we talked about this a few weeks ago. He actually would go and pray on his own quite often. He would do it in the mornings, and he would do it in the night. To quote a TV show I recently watched, the burning bush business doesn't happen often, not even in the Bible. God is usually more subtle. If you want to hear from God, you'll have to listen carefully because he speaks in whispers. You know, and what proof do we have of that? And you think, what about the burning bush? What about when Jesus was baptized? Right? Jesus was baptized and there was a dove that descended and there's a big loud booming voice that came from heaven saying, this is my son whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Yeah, that happens. But that's pretty rare. Even back in the Bible times, that was pretty rare. It's certainly pretty rare today for God to speak so directly and loudly and clearly without a shadow of a doubt. And God does speak a lot. He does speak primarily through his word. Like if you want to hear from God, open up your Bibles. Read one of the Gospels. Read the Proverbs. Read any book of the Bible. God will speak to you through his word. But he also talks to us during prayer. But again, it is very rarely so grand and direct. You will probably not be the exception. I will probably not be the exception. It is unlikely God is going to just speak loud and clear in a way that we can actually hear it right now to me or to you. He will talk to us quietly, which is why it's important that we're able to listen to him and why it's important to have a quiet environment. So there's an example of this in the Bible, pretty well-known example of God speaking, and it's not very flashy. This is a man named Elijah. He was at a very low point in his life when God spoke to him. He felt worthless. He felt like his life was over. He felt like his life no longer had purpose, and he didn't know what to do with his life. And here's what happens in 1 Kings 19. It says, and the Lord said, he's talking to Elijah, go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart, shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face, went out, stood at the mouth of the cave. Then a voice said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? And so it was there, when Elijah was at a very low point, it's when God spoke to him, and their conversation continues. Elijah says, God, it just feels like I'm alone in my faith. I feel like there's no one around me who shares this faith. I'm the last one. That's what he tells God. He says, God, I'm the last follower. And God says, there's more. He gives him some hope. He says, I'm with you. And he says, there's more followers. There's thousands of followers. And I'm going to give you an apprentice named Elisha. God's presence is not always found in dramatic displays, but can be found in quiet moments of reflection and listening. When I was, was going to say, when I was a young man, I'm 25 for a couple more weeks. When I was like 19 and 20, I would go to a park and try to get alone and try to quiet my mind, quiet my environment so I could talk to God. And at the park, I had this question on my mind. And my question was, what is redemption? Because I was feeling weight over my sins. I felt very unworthy to go the ministry path. And so I really wrestled with this question of what is redemption? And so I prayed for probably, I don't know, over an hour, just as I was walking around this park, not just like sitting there on a rock with my eyes closed. That'd be a little weird. Just prayed for an hour. What is redemption? What is redemption? Confessing my sin, praising God, just really getting alone with the Lord. The phone was off, phone was in a bag on my back, wasn't looking at it. What is redemption? And it feels silly to say, but as I walked by a waterfall, there's this voice in my head that said, you will find redemption at the top of this waterfall. And I was like, all right, that's kind of weird. I don't know about that. This is a waterfall, but sure, I'm up for waterfall climbing. So I climbed up this waterfall and I kept asking, like, what is redemption? What is redemption? What is redemption? And I climbed and I slipped and I climbed some more until I got to the top of the waterfall and I saw where the water was coming from. And the water was coming from this very nasty looking, overflowing well. It was very dirty. It was full of garbage. It was pretty disgusting. And then this voice just overwhelmed me, saying, like, this is redemption. Taking something so ugly, something that so dirty and trashy, and turning it into something beautiful, something that is a blessing to other people. That's what redemption is for God. We'll come back to that story. Quieting your environment, very important.